virtual meeting of the Personnel Board via Zoom. The meeting is called to order at 12 p.m. and our clerk will read the required statement into the record. Ms. Jasinski.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Personnel Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we aren't able to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Well done.
Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. You've earned your stipend for the year.
Good.
Which I guess since this is being taped, I should say is a joke. She receives no stipend. All right. And I will add that this meeting is being recorded and all votes will be by roll call. Okay, thank you very much. We're on item 2 in the agenda, administrative business. On pages 1 through 6 of your packet, we have minutes of February 10th, 2020. These were distributed to the board members in advance, so reading is waived. Does any board member have any comments or revisions or suggestions on the minutes?
Nope.
The chair seeing no hands, the minutes are approved by the chair as presented in the packet. Thank you all. Item 2B, we have an expenditure ledger courtesy of the town accountant's office. This is page 7 in your packet. Any comments or questions on the expenditure ledger? This is here just for informational purposes. Thank you. And lastly, under 2C, page 8 in the packet, this is the budget which I submitted. No changes. You approved this budget. Just for housekeeping, I wanted you to all see what I had submitted to Mr. Ballantyne's office. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is reports. I will be brief. You may already have seen on the blog or elsewhere that the Board of Selectmen, in concert with the town clerk and Mr. Semino, the moderator, have set a date for town meeting and I should say, and in concert with Mr. Purple as well, set a date for town meeting of Saturday, May 22nd. The choices were between May and June. They went with this May 22nd, just a little bit earlier. Mr. Semino, earlier than June, because Mr. Semino's feeling is if for any reason we have weather problems, then you always have a little window. And if you schedule it at the last possible date in June, you don't have that leeway. And then I spoke with Mr. Purple afterwards, and the deadline for this board to get him the final SAP revisions for the warrant is April 9th. So that's the deadline we're working with. And thanks to everybody who made that happen. And I think that's all I have. Any questions about town meeting or the warrant? Okay, great. So I'll turn this over to Mark and Vanessa for an update on the IT manager search.
So I wanted to update the board that we have made an offer for an IT manager, which we're really excited about. Our interview panel consisted of myself, the chair of the Municipal Technology Committee, Matt Probst, and Chief Achilles, who I believe was also in the audience today. So we're hoping to hear back before the end of the day from the offer we presented to this candidate. It is not someone that's coming from the public sector, so the 3-week vacation rule does not apply. But we will be seeking approval from the personnel board for a salary above the midpoint. So I know Mark will talk to you about that in just a moment, but it is looking good, and we hope to have news for you before the end of the week about a final recommendation to move forward.
I just have a question. We had talked before about before an offer letter went out, sending an email to this board with the terms and conditions. Has a letter been sent when you say an offer's been made? What does that mean?
No, it was just a phone call. So I have not done anything, put anything together, but that would be on my to-do list for this afternoon to share that. So
Okay.
how did you, I'm sorry, I don't recall, Betsy, where we left that conversation. Do you want that to go to the full board or to the chair?
It was gonna go to an email to the full board,
Okay. So I
right?
can do that this afternoon.
Because you can communicate with the full board as long as we don't communicate with each other. So the question, the problem we were trying to solve was if there were terms in there related to the SAP that we would later be required to honor, we want to see them before the offer's made. So in terms of the phone call, did the phone call offer terms that the if accepted, the personnel board would need to honor?
The only thing that would be asking the personnel board to approve a starting salary above the midpoint.
Okay. So
Because
you
this
made an
person-
offer of I didn't understand that the offer was extended. I thought we were in a negotiation. So you made the offer of a salary that the personnel board hasn't approved yet.
Correct. After a consultation with the town administrator about what we could afford, we presented that to the candidate this morning verbally, and we have not done anything else at this point. I would be writing that up for the personnel board this afternoon.
Okay. Does anybody else have a concern about the process? I know we all in agreement, we want to get the best possible person as soon as possible. And I'm not trying to hamstring anything. I'm just trying to make sure we enunciated a process, that we follow the process. And if we need to refine it, great. Was it the understanding of this board that verbal offers would be made and then we'd follow up afterwards? Does anybody have a concern? I'm not sure in my mind if the board should approve the salary before it's offered, or if the board is good waiting to see if it's accepted. I guess in one sense, if the person doesn't accept it, then we don't have.
I wouldn't want to waste your time. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there an issue with publicly?
Well, that was
talking about it now. So.
I'm a little concerned about having those conversations in a public meeting before I've made an offer, and other people that we've interviewed might see that conversation, but I defer to the board and to the town administrator, of course.
All right, thanks. This is kind of new, so I'd love to hear from board members if they have any issues or concerns.
Yeah, I mean, the way I guess I would approach it is when you speak to the employee, or even in the letter, say this is what we plan to offer, but it's subject to approval by the personnel board, so that it's clear that, you know, we have final authority. But
there's another step.
And to the board.
I think that's a proper approach.
Which you did, Vanessa, correct?
Yes, he's very aware that it requires both the full vote of the Board of Selectmen and the Personnel Board, because the salary would fall above the midpoint.
Would it make more sense to get the approvals first before extending an offer?
I just don't, I'm trying logistically, Jay, to think about that in a public meeting with, you know, how to go about that and not wasting the personnel board's time
But if we have
if
to-
that offer weren't accepted.
Right, but if we have to approve it on our end, it's a much worse candidate experience if you go back and give them an offer and then come back and say, oh yeah, by the way, that wasn't approved, so now we gotta give you another offer. They have this already in their mind and they're gonna be like, this is just a mess, I'm gonna take a job somewhere else. We should have, whenever you're doing an offer, you should have the approved number before you actually give it to them. At least that's what I would do.
It's just, I think it's complicated on our end because we have to conduct all of this business in a public meeting. That's what I'm trying to just straighten out in my mind.
So from a candidate side, are you saying, here's the offer, we'll let you know in 3 weeks when we have a meeting if it's actually approved or not?
Well, the way the conversation I had with him this morning was, this is the salary we would like to offer you. It requires the approval of the personnel board, and your full appointment is must be approved by the Board of Selectmen because they are the appointing authority. We don't have the ability to authorize the appointment without the selectmen.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is, right, so we're telling him, here's the offer we'd like to give you, but we don't know if it's even going to be approved. I think it should be reversed and say, get the approvals first,
Mm-hmm.
and then go back and say, hey, here's what we can offer you. You don't want to go back to him 3 weeks later and be like, yeah, we were off by 10 grand.
No,
I
I'm
mean-
confident that it would
Can't
not
the
be off by
offer-
that much.
When the position's actually opened and approved, that's when you should be getting the approval of how much you can do. So you know that prior to doing all of the recruiting, so that when you're actually sourcing and talking to candidates, you can say, where are you looking to be salary wise? If they come in 10 grand higher and you come back and say, yeah, we can only do 130 as a max. And they're like, yeah, I need 150. Now you don't have to waste everybody's time interviewing and scheduling and doing all that because you already know it doesn't work.
So that opens up a whole different paradigm, Jay. I mean, does personnel board want to, when we're looking to hire a position, do we want to take a look at, here's what other communities are doing, here's what we're currently paying for the person who has just left the position, and personnel board is going to set a number that they would be comfortable approving up to?
Yeah, that's what normally happens before the job gets opened. You should have that.
Yeah, I mean, that would, I
We
think,
just don't generally negotiate in public, in a public meeting. That's what I'm struggling with a little bit.
Right, all you need in a public meeting is to just get with the approved salaries. You can negotiate with the candidate offline, but you don't want to negotiate with the candidate and then say, hey, we have another board meeting in 3 weeks. We'll let you know if this number is approved or not. We should know that prior to even opening the job where you can be salary wise. Then you can just make the offer and you're done. You don't have to worry about getting board approval because you already know it's approved.
Like I said, this is a new pathway, so I'm glad we're having this discussion. So to one of Jay's points, and I don't disagree, Jay, in the world that I come from, an offer's not an offer until it's an approved offer. So you're making a conditional offer. And if that works for you, fine, knowing that under Barry's approach, you will be coming back to us. And that's been clear. The other thing is in Zoom world, we don't need 3 weeks. I have assured, since we started having these conversations around Christmas time, I assured Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale, and recently had a nice discussion with Mr. Probst of the chair of the Municipal Technology Committee, that the Personnel Board stands ready and willing to have a meeting on 48 hours notice to consider what you need from us. So I think we've already gone down the road. I think we've got a lot to get to for this meeting. An offer's been extended. I think we should go with where we are at present, and then maybe this can be a learning experience, and we can take into consideration Mr. Dietz's advice, and maybe we want to change this the next time around. In some sense, I'm not sure that legally you start the process by coming to ask us to waive the SAP. I'm not sure that's appropriate either. I'm much more comfortable that you've been trying to interview and find someone, and you come to us 3 months down the road and say, hey, we really need to go higher in the range. I'm not sure if the board would be as constrained early on in the process. Maybe they would be by a salary survey that says, hey, I think we need to pay over midpoint. I know that when you come to me, you have tried to hire someone lower in the range and haven't been able to. So I don't know how other board members feel. I think we're in a certain posture, and the best we can do for now is to tell you that we stand ready and willing to schedule a board meeting on 48 hours notice to do what needs to be done. Does that work for the board?
Yes.
Okay. And if anybody wants to, my goal for 2021 is to get some of these process decisions written down. When I started on the board, it seemed like every case that came before us, we would discuss it in that meeting for that action. And I'm hoping now that we can write some of this down and say this, at least for this board, we've been together I don't know who's the newest member, but at least 2 years, so we understand each other. And I think it would be good to start getting some of this written down, so there's not so much confusion. Because we do have a lot of these calls between Vanessa and myself. Hey, where do we leave this? The board said they wanted this. Does it mean that? So I'm making 2021 the year of the written policy, hopefully, along with year of the rat and year of the chicken. So anyone who wants to help me in that effort. So good luck to you, and please let us know. And I gather you'll be looking for a meeting hopefully within the next week. So does
Yes.
that work generally for the board?
Week,
You're all on
As long
call?
as it's not
If
an
you're on,
in-person,
what?
as long as it's not in person in the next week.
No.
Okay. Sounds good. Mr.
I will
Purple,
not
did you have
be here.
anything you wanted to add?
No, I think, I think I got a lot more than I needed. But like I will say that, obviously, this offer is simply conditional. And it's been framed in that way. And that if it doesn't pass through personnel board successfully, then it's done. If it passes through personnel board successfully, but the appointment fails at the selectman's level, then it's done. So I think that Ms. Hale has kind of laid out the tripwires, to the candidate that, here's where, we think we are. Are we talking in the same place? We kind of in the same ballpark. Once we know that the applicant is aligned with our way of thinking about the position and what we value the position at, then at that point, we need to engage personnel board and find out if you concur. And then if you concur, then we need to bring it to the Board of Selectmen and have.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? All right. Thank you all for the update. As is most things we consider, it's always a little more nuanced. But at least in this case, it's not just the personnel board that has to have a meeting, the Board of Selectmen as well. And presumably your candidate understands that if they're stepping into the municipal framework, wait till you tell them their raise is, contingent on annual approval. So, but anyway, if they're stepping into municipal world, this is just the beginning. So thank you for your efforts to find somebody. We'll all benefit from that appointment. Thank you all. All right, we're moving on to 4, new business. We have a request from the town clerk. It's at pages 9 and 10 of your packet. Just a little background, as you know, yes, Vanessa, if you could bring Mr. Haggerty in, we'll be with him in just a minute. He's here. Is he in? Okay. Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Vanessa.
Yes, he's promoted to panelist.
Thank you. So when we have been going through the SAP, and I think my process with this probably started in maybe November, December, Vanessa and I were going through the SAP. I always ask her, what do you see that needs to be done? And this year that evolved into a spreadsheet. But one of the ones that caught my eye was section 13A and B. And I proposed to the board that we take a look at it. It's in your packet under the revisions. We never got to it. I think Ms. Hale told me this was something she hadn't had a request under that she could remember. Neither could Mr. Purple. So we do have some revisions pending. And then we have a request from Mr. Haggerty for benefits under 13A. So this will be a good chance to look at it in its current text and see how we want to interpret it, and then that will educate us later on for whether or not we want to change the section. This, for me, also, I think is the first time I am seeing a question in my 3.5 years on the board. So, Mr. Haggerty, you have the floor to explain your request.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming.
You're very welcome. Before I jump into this, I missed the first part of your meeting. I had an unfortunate encounter with a large hot cup of coffee at the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru, which burned my hand. So I missed your first part of your meeting. But
Would you like Would you like us to go on to something else and then come back to you?
Nope, but it just, when I heard Vanessa mention something about a concern about discussing something about salaries in open meeting, I don't know if you folks had already previously discussed option 2 under the executive session options, which would give you an opportunity to meet in executive session to discuss, let me get this up here. To conduct
Just got my
strategy.
thing out, Jim, to reread that.
Yeah, it says to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct
Right.
collective bargaining, blah, blah, blah. So it would appear that if the board chose to discuss this, you could do so in executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Hegarty, as always, for being on the job. I had this discussion with, I think it was Tim Norris, Special Town Labor Council, years became chair. And I believe, and I can follow up, I was told that because we're not the board that actually makes the hiring decision, this exception for executive session would not apply to the board.
Interesting, okay.
I think this was, does anybody else remember having that discussion with Tim Norris? All right, maybe something to revisit. I remember thinking that salary information would come up to us in this context. And I may be mistaken, so that may be something to check back with Attorney Norris. So thank you very much for that information.
So I come before you about Renee Chen. When Renee was hired on July 1st of last year, and I had reduced the position from 23 and a half hours down to 19 and a half, survived all of that. But throughout that time, Renee worked more than 19 and a half hours, and she worked that for more than 3 months in a row, which according to the bylaw section 13A would entitle her to full-time benefits. And she continued to work more than 19 and a half hours a week on average through actually February. She continued at that when I was out with my surgery, and she is back now at her normal 19 and a half hours. So the bylaw says that she's entitled to these benefits, so I intend to, in the next payroll period, put her in for that. It would entitle her to 35.75 hours of holiday pay at $800, $879, 18.9 hours of vacation time, just under 6 hours of personal time and 28 and a half hours of sick time. And I arrived at those numbers by looking at the average hours she worked over that time, prorated, if she worked 23 point whatever hours. Let me back up just for a second here. So just to put in perspective, between July 1 and October 7, in that 90-day period, she worked an average of 27.8 hours. And then from October 7 forward through February 10, she worked 25.4 hours. So when I came up with these calculations, I took the average of the 25.4 hours starting October 7, 25.4 over 40 times what the rate would be for a 40-hour employee, and came up with those numbers. So I guess this is the first time it's come up, and I will put this in the next payroll, but I will say, because of legislation that is pending right now to make all there's several pieces of legislation, but they all have something in common. Election legislation that's pending right now will make defined mandatory in-person early voting, defined for all state elections, primary and the election itself, the general election, as well as mandatory vote by mail, ballots being, cards being mailed to people. All this is up in the air. So the same extra effort that we saw in this past year will occur in the future. It won't occur next year, this coming year, because we don't have any elections in the fall, but we will see this activity again in future heavy election years.
Are you finished, Mr. Hegarty?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. It's hard to know if I don't see somebody. Thank you for the information. I appreciate everything you and your office do to keep democracy going in Southborough. So just to make clear, if I understand it. So section 13A says, and you quoted here in your memo, thanks. A part-time employee shall be eligible for full-time status when the employee has worked 20 hours or more per week for a period of at least 3 consecutive months. So that tells me that they're not entitled to the benefits for the first 3 months, but once they maybe call the first 3 consecutive months a qualifying period. Once they pass the qualifying period, then thereafter they would be eligible for benefits. Is that your understanding?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so the qualifying period, we're all in agreement. There's a qualifying period of 3 months, and then after that, if they continue to work, they get the benefits. So the qualifying period here would be July, August, and September of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so in order to be eligible, the employee would have to have worked, by the language of the statute as it currently stands, 20 hours or more per week for those 3 months. You say here in your memo she worked an average of 27.8 hours per week. Is it your request? Did she work 20 hours or more per week for those 3 months, or is it just an average?
The 27.8 refers to the first 90 days. And for each one of those periods, she worked more than 20 hours a week.
Okay, so she would qualify if she worked more than 20 hours, because the statute the bylaw is pretty specific. For a period of 3 months, so 12 weeks or 6 however pay periods, she worked 20 hours or more for each of those weeks. I was just a little confused by your use of the word average. And then on the second one, you said she worked more than 20 hours every week. The first 2 bullet points were just stated a little differently. So, but you're telling us that Ms. Chen, from July 1, 20 to September 30, 20, Ms. Chen worked more than 20 hours for every week.
Yes.
Okay. Then under my interpretation of the statute, she would qualify for overtime starting on October 1st.
Well, full-time benefits, not overtime.
Oh, I'm sorry, not overtime. It doesn't really say what it says. They're considered full-time. And this gets back to my reason for wanting to look at this section. So if the person qualifies, that is to say, they've worked 20 hours or more per week for 3 months, they're eligible for full-time status. And this board has never looked at what that means. Full-time status, but you're correct. She's not eligible for overtime unless she works over 40, and you're not claiming that. So she would be eligible for other benefits attending to full-time status. Okay, so that was just my question as a threshold to make sure that she qualified, and then I'll open it to the board for comments. Does anybody interpret it differently?
No, I think it's pretty cut and dry the way it's been presented. And I think that, she followed and falls within what the bylaws call for, and I think we ought to approve it.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Anybody else?
Do we know what the actual hours are per week?
Yes, I have that. That's how I came up with the averages. And she actually did qualify for overtime with the pay period on the November 4th. She did get paid overtime. She worked 114 hours on those 2 weeks. 117 hours, sorry.
All right.
I'm looking that she worked about 75 hours for the month of July. Jim, do you have numbers in front of
Just
you?
a quick question. If you're looking at something, do you want to tell the board what you're looking at, just so we know?
I had actually called Mark and asked, I questioned this with the benefits, because it's a huge expense to the taxpayer. So I had called Mark yesterday and I asked him to clarify hours for me. And Jim and Betsy also have received the response from Mark. So I'm looking at the employee hours, but it's not broken down by week. It's by pay period. So like each check is 2 weeks. So I'm looking at numbers. So from July 2nd to July 15th, I have down that she worked 31.5 hours. And then the next pay period, which is the next 2 weeks, July 16th to the 29th, I have that she worked 43.5 hours. So I'm averaging that. And if you average the number of months, I mean, the weeks for the month, which is 4.4286, I have an average of 16.93 hours a week. So my question is, we should be looking at we should be looking at the weekly hours that she worked and then adding them up for the month. And if you do that, she didn't do that in July. She did do that in August and September. So she doesn't qualify until she goes to the next period. She has to have 3 consecutive months of working those hours. So I don't see that. I don't see that she did that in July, Jim. So that's why I'm asking you to clarify that for me. Because that's not the average that I have. That's not, if you take the hours for the month and you divide it by the number of weeks in that month, that should give you the hours per week.
Okay, I'm just going to step in. Thank you, Ms. Jasinski.
So I need Brian or Mark or someone else. This is a numbers thing, and
Thank
I
you,
just need
Dorianne.
clarified.
If I didn't know what you were looking at, I would have found the previous, I understand you're saying you think there's an issue with the hours, but if the board members don't have a report in front of them. So just to clarify, Ms. Jasinski had questions about this. Yesterday, she requested from Mr. Purple or Mr. Ballantyne, a report from payroll of the overtime hours. And I was copied on that, but the rest of the board was not. And I didn't want to send this out because I didn't understand exactly the nature. I figured we would talk about it when we had Mr. Hegarty in front of us. So folks, the way that the payroll is done, it's 2 weeks at a time. So, but the bylaw says per week. So what we would need is a payroll report. In my opinion, we need a payroll report that shows the actual hours that were worked by Ms. Chen on a weekly basis, not as we usually do through payroll. So thanks to everybody who tried to get Dorianne where she needed to go. She's not there yet with her questions, and the rest of us aren't seeing what she's seeing. So my suggestion, if the board agrees, we would table this matter and we would get a report. And I would ask that Mr. Ballantyne and Mr. Hegarty, if they have a chance before our next meeting, put their heads together and give the board the information the way that the SAP needs it, not the way that can you give us, Brian, actual per week hours? Is that possible on your system without too much trouble? I know you do payroll in 2 week chunks.
Yeah, no, the accountant actually keeps that as a record. So I will just ask Carl to, either give me copies that I can put in a spreadsheet or we can work it up. It doesn't, yeah, we can get that.
As usual, Mr. Ballantyne, to the point and very cooperative. So if the board, unless the board has other questions, the way I see it, I appreciate that Ms. Jasinski has issues, but I don't think we can resolve them today. And I think it would be more appropriate for the board to have the information, all of us together to look at it. And that would just basically be the hours that the employee worked for July 1st to September 30, 20, the actual hourly. Unless you have that, Mr. Hegarty, now, and you want to screen share with us?
I will. I have just read the note from Mr. Purple. I was at a doctor's when I haven't read that. So I will go back and research this and then talk to Mr. Ballantyne, and we'll see you the next time.
All right. Ms. Jasinski, does that work for you?
That works fine for me. I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing and we're not setting a very dangerous precedent going forward. So
Okay.
I'm good.
Sounds good. So we'll either be meeting next week to talk about IT manager. I'll just tack this on when the report's available and the next meeting that we have. It sounds like it's going to be pretty simple. Now that Mr. Rubenstein had a comment?
Yeah, can we get the report all the way through February 15th of 2021?
Sure. So we've got the qualifying period of July 1, 20 to September 30, 20, and then the report would carry through for the actual period for which he is seeking reimbursement, which is October 1st to February 15th, 21. That makes sense. Thank you. Thanks for that, Barry. Everybody
Madam
all good
Chair?
on this? Mr. Purple?
Just one quick comment. In being asked to take a look at this, and again, I hadn't looked at it. I think, in talking with Ms. Hale and Mr. Ballantyne, I think that the way that the town clerk applied the bylaw was correct. The only question is whether or not the hours, it met the standard of the bylaw in terms of the hours for the consecutive weeks. I think that's the only thing that needs to be resolved in this.
Thanks. I agree.
I agree.
Anybody else?
No, I agree.
All right. It's never a problem for me as chair if people want to ask questions and do homework. The only issue I have is that the whole board doesn't have the information because it came up so close to the meeting date. So where there's no harm in tabling it, if the benefits are payable, they'll be payable next month as well as this month. So, Mr. Hegarty, anything else from you?
No, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here today. And again, thank you to you and your staff for everything that you do for us.
Thank you. I'll pass it on.
rolling.
Have a good day.
All right. You too. All right. We're on 5, unfinished business, personnel bylaw, SAP. There's a document in the packet at pages 11 to 25, maybe. Sorry. 28, 11 to 28. So these are the revisions we've already talked about. I actually turned on track changes. It was painful, but you have all the comments in the margin. I hope this is easy to follow. Things that the board's already approved. I've noted no further action, so we can hopefully just skim right through this and get to the ones that still do need some action. All right, so page 1, nothing. Actually, I won't go by the page number in the document. I'll go by the packet page. So Bates 12. I've added a definition for exempt employee and non-exempt employee, and this is required if we're gonna change section 11H. So why don't we go, when we go to 11H, we'll talk about that. Nothing further. Okay. Nothing on Bates 13. Nothing on Bates 14. I'm just going through and please speak up if I've missed something that says further action required. I think we got as far as, okay, Bates 18. If you would take a quick look at section 11F, this is jury duty. My comments say no further action required. So this section as currently written provides for jury duty pay for all employees. The board previously voted to make that qualified to full-time employees only. Mr. Dietz sent me an email this morning and alerted me to the fact that the law says otherwise. So I took a quick look at compensation for jury duty on Massachusetts State mass.gov website, getting paid for jury duty. And it told me, as Jay knew, full-time, part-time, temporary, or casual employees are entitled to jury duty. So the previous adding full-time should come out. Any questions about that?
So I mean,
No.
technically they are, but there is a little bit of a, difference in there as well. Dave, Barry, you guys probably know about that as well. So the company, depending on the companies, generally, I think they have a couple of days that they're doing like jury duty that the companies can cover. Most companies on average will cover at least a week or two for them being paid. The state does give them $50 a day after a 3 or 4 day period because that's all that the companies have to cover for them. Most companies just say, listen, if you're on jury duty for a week, we'll just pay you for the week. They're not going to go back and try to readjust their salary. But if they're on like a month-long trial, they don't have to pay them their salary for a month-long trial. They could literally just say, we'll hold your job for you. When you come back, we'll pay you for 2 weeks, and then you don't get your salary. You just get the $50 for the state. I don't know if Barry or Dave, you guys have run into that before.
So
Mr. Dietz,
are we We
I just
talked
do
about-
want to add something, Barry. I apologize. I didn't. So I'm just looking at something I printed off of mass.gov and I was not entirely clear. So once again, Jay, you've rescued me. It says if you work in Massachusetts as full-time, part-time, temporary, or casual, your employer must pay you your regular wages for any work missed for the first 3 days. That's
Right.
an important
First 3
point
days.
that Jay was making.
Yeah.
After the third day, the state may compensate you at the rate of $50.
Right.
So we're only obligated for the first 3 days, but as Jay has just said, we may want to provide more. And I'm sorry, I didn't bring that point up. It's 3
Most
days.
companies go at least 2 weeks
Okay.
on average. I mean, I don't know what municipal does, but it'd be pretty shitty to say, God, it's been on jury duty for 4 days. Hey, we'll only cover 3. Here's $50. Now go, you know.
So just to clarify, as of the first of the year, before we started looking at this, the provision in the SAP said any employee who's called to jury duty shall be paid. It had no time qualifier. Didn't say after 3 days we dump you. It just said any employee. And then you recall, because you were all here, we went through this with Mr. Ballantyne, Mr. Purple, Ms. Hale, and we said, all right, we need to clean up all of section 11. Does it apply full-time, part-time? And I think the word was, most of it just applies to full-time. So just for clarification, we added full-time. And thanks to Mr. Dietz, I now understand that that was inappropriate. So I think the whole problem can be solved by just not going forward to add full-time, not qualifying full-time. So revoking our previous amendment. Does that work for everyone? Now, if anyone wants to discuss that we further want to limit it, it is not so limited now in time. But if you think we ought to cut back and just make it what the minimum of the law requires, I'll open that up to discussion.
Barry, you were going to say something?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, I think we just should leave it as it was. You know, it gets to be arbitrary deciding how much is the right amount. Sounds like we never had anyone out for, I would just, we have enough other things to do. I would just leave it.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree with Barry.
Yeah, and just say, that's the state law. We're just going to follow, we're just following the state law. Be done
All
with it.
right. So just for the record, so we have it because we passed a motion to change it. The chair makes a motion that we rescind our previous amendment to section F and we leave section 11F as it was without the insertion of the words full-time. Second?
Second,
All right. Ms. Jazinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
yes.
Mr. Dietz.
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative. Thank you. Just so if somebody's reading all our minutes and keeping track. Okay. So the next thing that needed attention was section 11H. This was court time pay. This was something else we had looked at and we hadn't drawn the appropriate distinction between exempt versus non-exempt. Thank you again, Mr. Dietz, for your professional advice. I did go back and I revised this section. It's what you have in your packet on page 18. Does that meet with everyone's approval, comments? Anybody have issues with how I've revised it?
Good.
All right, so I'm going to make a motion. Did anybody have anything? No, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that the Personnel Board amend section 11H court time pay to read. If the town requires that an employee appear in court as a witness or in any other capacity arising from the performance of the employee's duty, or on behalf of the Commonwealth or the town in any civil or criminal case pending in any court or other official government board or agency, then such appearance and related travel time shall constitute work time for purposes of calculating weekly hours worked. If such appearance or related travel time causes a non-exempt employee to exceed 40 hours of work in any given work week, the employer shall be eligible for overtime pay in accordance with section 6B. This section does not apply to exempt employees. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
All right. Ms. Jazinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
Mr. Deeds,
yes,
and the chair votes in the affirmative. All right. And then we go back and you see now why I added exempt and non-exempt on page 12 under definitions. So I'm going to make a motion that the board include the following definitions in section 1. Exempt employee means an employee who is not entitled to overtime pay under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. And non-exempt employee means an employee who is entitled to overtime pay under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Jazinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
yes,
Mr. Deeds,
yes,
Ms. Rosenblum votes in the affirmative. Thank you. All right. Continuing on our way, we come to section, our old friend, section 13, transitions. So this was something we discussed changing, and my concern was under 13A, when a part-time employee works more than 20 hours a week for a period of 3 consecutive weeks, the
Months.
bylaw currently says they're eligible for full-time status. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean if they're in a part-time job, we're going to take their job and put it into Schedule A? Because I have a problem with that. If it just means we're going to pay them benefits as if they were full-time, I don't have a problem with that. So I proposed a couple of alternatives, and that's where we left it. And I know Mr. Rubenstein had a concern about deleting the provision. So I opened this up for comment.
well, I mean, my concern wasn't really about deleting it, but the way option B was written, I had some concern that it could be subject to abuse by a department head who wanted to use a part-time employee to do full-time work because they could save money doing it. So my suggestion would be to limit the period of time where the department head could do that on his or her own authority. So say that for the first month, an department head can do that in exigent circumstances. But if it's longer than that, they need to get approval from a third party, and I would suggest us. So if someone's going to have a part-time employee doing full-time work for longer than a month, they have to come before the personnel board, sort of explain, give a rationale for why it's necessary to do that. So my suggestion would be that in option B, paragraph A read, part-time employee may work 20 hours or more per week for a period of no longer than 1 month if requested by their department head due to exigent circumstances, or for longer if approved by the personnel board. So that would address my concern about that language.
So a part-time employee may work 20 hours or more per week for a period of no longer than 1 month instead of 3 consecutives if requested by their department head due to urgent circumstances, comma, or for longer if approved by the personnel board. Would you keep in such cases, the employee will remain a part-time employee with no change in status?
Yes,
Yes.
And then, did you like B?
yeah, I think B is fine. I think we should be asked to determine what compensation the person should receive for that time.
Okay. Comments I open. Thank you, Barry, once again for the guidance. I'm so fortunate to have so many intelligent people with knowledge base to guide us in these things. I really appreciate it. Comments or questions from the board, or if any of our administrators are looking at this and have comments, anybody?
I have a question. Should we, to what Barry added, or for longer if approved by the personnel board, should we add working in conjunction with the personnel director, or do you want to just do just personnel board and that includes the personnel director? Because he may have more information than we do on cost and finances and stuff that may impact the taxpayers. So I'm just kind of asking. I
consult with Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale on every agenda anyway. I can't imagine in the last 3 years that I've had anything I haven't talked to you guys about. But if the board wants to codify that.
I'm just asking. I'm just throwing it out. I'm just asking.
We do a lot in this story. Off the top of my head, it would require me to put that in everywhere. In anywhere that the SAP says we can do something. But there's a provision in there that says we consult with him on matters of, so.
Yeah, and the personnel director is at our meetings. He can voice his concerns, objections, whatever, as part of our consideration of that. So
Okay. Well, the other thing is, before the department head approves making, giving these extra hours, they should have that movement in their budget. They should be able to cover it in their own budget. Otherwise, how are they paying for that? So, if they're going to give all these benefits and all this stuff, that has to be covered by their own budget. Because that's not what the reserve fund is for. So you can't go to the reserve fund for that. So I don't know if we need to stipulate that in here somehow. Mark, I'm not sure how to handle that or where to put that in there, but
it's under B, Dorian. I put it in under B.
okay, sorry. I was talking about the A. All right, got it.
And the other thing is, I can imagine a scenario. I think it's too bad. I don't think Mr. Haggerty is still with us anymore.
Oh, he is. He has his hand up.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, it occurs to me, he gets unfunded mandates from the state on a daily basis as to what he needs to do for
You want me to
town
bring
meeting,
him
for
back
elections.
over?
What?
You want me to bring the clerk back over? He does have his hand raised.
Sure. So I can imagine a scenario where we need to pay for something he needs to do, whether he anticipated it or not. So I'll let him speak to that. We'll go to the horse's mouth. Jim, you have the floor. You had a comment?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we could.
Okay, thank you for bringing it up. Election, two things happened this summer. One is that the election laws changes came out after the budget was approved and voted by the voters, number one. But number two, when the state comes out with election requirements for early voting and so forth and so on, the costs that we incur are not in the budget, and depending upon the time of the year, the state auditor allows us, puts a survey out to us to identify these extra costs associated with an unfunded mandate. And the town gets reimbursed for that. So, for example, some of the costs that we incurred this summer for postage and for mail-in voting and things like that has already come back to us. So it's come back to the budget itself. I'm working on a request right now for extra costs that we incurred this summer for other early voting costs, which frankly would also include the extra money that I was looking to get to Renee. And that money will be reimbursed to the town by the state auditor, but it will come back to us in the next fiscal year into free cash. There's usually, depending on the time of the year, the town gets the money back for these unfunded mandates, so it comes back. So as to Ms. Jasinski's requirement that this be money in the budget, that wouldn't fly for somebody like me who has to react to these things for unfunded mandates, because the money would come back to the town as a reimbursement afterwards. So basically I'm overspending, but the town gets the money back. Either in that same fiscal year or in the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Jim. That's information we didn't have, so thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Ms. Hale, did you have a comment other than to let us know that Jim was?
Just a question, actually. In option B, paragraph B, so, funding, if available in the current budget, of course, current department budget. I just want to clarify additional compensation. If the board felt that that was just restricted to, salary, what we're paying that person for additional hours worked, or was there any other type of compensation that you were thinking of? Or is it just hour for hour or in addition to hours requested to work?
No, that well, I intended it to mean full-time, the types of benefits that Jim was looking for Renee.
Okay,
But, and he's not actually asking for, he may not be asking for everything. It would be the discretion of the department head. It presumes they're getting paid their normal compensation.
okay.
I
Yeah,
just-
because to the clerk's point, some things would be outside of the operating budget. Like if it were related to health insurance, it would be coming from, an insurance budget, not the department budget.
Great point, thank you. So I think maybe the way to incorporate all these concerns, and I appreciate that Dorianne is always concerned about budget. Her advisory stripes are always showing, and that's as it should be. We should be reminded that somebody's got to pay. These are our unfunded mandates. Perhaps I would change my recommendation based on what Jim has told us. I don't want to take out subject to available funding because Dorian's right. It always needs to be funded, but maybe stop there. And the first sentence of section B would say, full-time hours, comma, subject to available funding, period. Because the funding might be outside of the budget, as Jim has just explained. Perhaps that's the easiest way to balance the competing concerns. Does that make sense to folks?
Could I offer something as well?
Well, I think most budgets have to. Jim is a separate island. He's got his own thing. So he has state money coming in. Our other departments, I don't believe, had that ability. So I think.
But they can't know about exigent circumstances a year
Right.
before when they're doing their budgets. So I'm trying to, the other thing we can do is, table this and discuss it at our next meeting and have people bring in some more recommendations. Trying to wrap the SAP today, but if you want to think about it and propose something, we will be meeting again in short order.
No, I'd just like to get it right the first time. Mark, does that apply to other departments like Jim's circumstances where he really is separate from the rest of us? He's an elected official. I mean, do all the departments have that ability to get money from different directions, or do they mostly rely on their personal budgets for the year?
No, well, people are bound by the line items as voted at town meeting. And then obviously anything that falls outside of the selectmen have increased their, or tightened up, I think, some of the abilities to move funds without approvals from the selectmen on certain things. But I mean, people are bound by the line items as voted by town meeting. If you need things above and beyond that, there's got to be another funding source. It usually ends up being the reserve fund through advisory. Or, as Mr. Hegarty noted, if you do get funding that comes from the state, the accountant will allow you to deficit spend, knowing that funding is coming and everything, which makes you whole. The only other thing I will offer, since you gave me the floor, is I think we just need to be careful. I know that in Mr. Hegarty's request for Ms. Chen, we were simply talking about accrual of benefits in terms of vacation, holiday pay, sick and personal leave. But as Ms. Hale noted, health insurance is a full-time benefit. And I think that if somebody is part-time being extended full-time status, they have availability of all benefits to them. I don't think that we simply can pick and choose which ones would apply, to certain circumstances. So I just caution on that as well.
Question, Mr. Purple. Thank you for your comments. We are picking and choosing. I don't think we lose the authority to pick and choose unless it's prescribed by state law. We're not, that's why this gets to the heart of why I questioned changing this to begin with. As currently written for the last, I don't know how many dozens of years, this would seemingly allow a part-time employee to get health insurance. But once they're not part-time anymore, once they're not full-time anymore, do we drop them from the health insurance? The section as written does not make sense.
No, like I said, I like the clarification that you're trying to do, Betsy.
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
make sense to me. So I would not be, I would like to leave an element of, and again, we have another section where we were about to change it and it didn't meet the requirements of state law. So I think maybe at some point I'd like to have a little commission on making sure that the SAP complies with state law. Because sometimes if Jay and Barry weren't here, I wouldn't know whether or not we were complying with state law. So in this case, I'd like to leave it to the discretion of the board. I would not consider putting a temporary person who's working exigent circumstances on health insurance and dropping them on and off. You really can't do that anyway. Don't you have enrollment periods?
Can't do that.
I think the only other time I'm going to weigh on Brian's historical knowledge here that this may have come up is with part-time dispatchers when we had a shortage in our communications officer staff. In that case, they did go on insurance for a temporary period, didn't they, Brian?
I can't remember if they actually took it.
Or did it not get to the 3-month period?
I don't think it got to the
Talked
3-month
about
period.
health insurance in that example, but we could go back and verify for the board whether that did in fact happen.
Yeah, I don't think it ever got triggered.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you. That was the only other example I could think of.
Well,
Thank you
well,
both.
should
So I
we-
think I'm trying to do what Mark has asked us to do, which is not put too much detail into the SAP, but rather than have a separate policy, and maybe that's what we need to do is just do a separate policy. Give the board discretion to recognize that these circumstances come up, have the department head come to us. If there's funding for it, yes, but not say they will get each and every one of the benefits that full-time permanent employees get. And if we can't do that quickly, we're going to have to move on. So,
Well, then,
and again, I don't want to rush through it, but we lose Mr. Dietz at 2:00. Maybe we could come back to it, but we have other matters pending in the SAP.
Betsy, could we put a qualifier and put a C and say benefits not to include healthcare, health benefits? That is for part-time, I mean, full-time only. And then that would take care of that? Or can we not do that?
I think that's getting into the kind of detail I don't want to get into in this
Okay,
SAP, but I think in my mind, when I say in B, and again, it's not about what I say, I put it in here. If you don't like it, we don't pass it. Department heads may submit requests for additional compensation. Personnel board will entertain. I don't say we're going to give them X, Y, Z. So to Dorian's question, I don't think we have to say under C, we're not going to give you X, Y, Z. We're saying you come talk to us and we'll have a dialogue.
I think it's fine as is. I'd be prepared to vote to approve it and move forward.
Mr. Dietz, Mr. Nixon?
I'm okay as is.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
agree. I agree on that.
So Dorian, are you cool with that if
I'm
everybody else?
fine. I'm
All
fine. I was just trying to clarify and help if something were to happen, but I'm fine with the way it is.
Absolutely. I think it will hopefully be an improvement over the existing one, which didn't really say anything. And if we need to look at it again, we can look at it again. All right. So thank you all for your comments. Chair's going to make a motion that we delete the current text of section 13 and replace it with the following language. The title of the section will be part-time employees working full-time hours temporarily. Section A to read, a part-time employee may work 20 hours or more per week for a period of no longer than 1 month if requested by their department head due to exigent circumstances, comma, or for longer if approved by the personnel board, period. In such cases, the employee will remain a part-time employee with no change in status. B, department heads may submit requests for additional compensation for part-time employees temporarily working full-time hours, comma, subject to available funding, period. The personnel board shall entertain such requests at the first available opportunity.
Second, was that the motion?
Yes,
Second.
thank you. Ms. Jasinski,
Yes,
Mr. Nixon,
Yes,
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
Mr. Dietz,
Yes,
Ms. Rosenblum votes in the affirmative. Thank you all. I think if I have Jay and Barry on board, I have my legal and my HR bases covered, and I hope that this will be an improvement. And if it proves to cause more trouble, then we'll be back here again and we'll fix it. So thank you all for your time on that one. All right. Then moving on, I'm on Bates 24. We need action required. We had previously discussed there's there's an extra position in the schedule under administrative and support staff. We have an administrative assistant at grade 3 and an admin assistant 2 at grade 3. And I had previously discussed this with Vanessa, who informed me that we currently don't have any admin 2s and agreed with me that we should just strike this. And I overlooked it in the first go round. So I'm recommending chairs. Well, before I make a motion, does anybody have a question? I'm just going to strike a redundant position. Okay, chair makes a motion that the board recommend striking administrative assistant 2 from Schedule A. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions? Okay, Ms. Jasinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
Mr. Dietz,
Yes,
and the chair votes in the affirmative. Thank you. And again, qualifying all this, these are all just recommendations to town meeting. Sometimes I state the motion as that the board delete, but when I print up the minutes, it's always understood that we're recommending that the town delete. So hope that's clear. All right. Also on page 24, the rates for full-time positions. You see the current table's been lined out and a new table has been put in. And the note says this is the new salary table. So the Personnel Board previously approved recommending that town meeting increase the salaries by plus 1.9%. This is the table. You just hadn't seen it before. I don't think any vote is necessary. You've already approved these rates. They were calculated by Mr. Ballantyne. Hello, Mr. Ballantyne. We were just discussing your table under full-time positions. Thank you for providing that. Any questions from the board on the new salary table? All right. We are now on Schedule C, page 25. The board previously approved recommending the town meeting increase the salaries in Schedule C by plus 1.9. You haven't seen the table before. Here it is. Thank you, Mr. Ballantyne, for providing it. I don't think any further vote is necessary since you already approved the increase. All right. That brings us to any comments or questions on Schedule C? This brings us to Schedule D. Ms. Hale, do we have Chief Achilles with us?
Popping him over.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, Chief. How are you?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for being here. I've been speed talking to get to you as quickly as possible.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. A lot of people have to do a great job to pull off the bylaw every year. So thank you very much. All right. So I have taken your proposal. I've incorporated it. It's the packet at Bates, page 26. And the supporting documentation is in the packet at pages 29, 30, 31, and also some job descriptions. We skip a few pages. We pick up with the job descriptions at page 36. So I just have a couple of questions for you, and then I'll turn it over to the board for questions, Chief, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So I notice and I like to juxtapose what's in the SAP with what someone is requesting so I can see them in the same place. The lieutenants are gone. We currently have lieutenants in grade 13 and 14, and I don't see them in the proposed schedule. What happened to the lieutenants?
As I think I overviewed the last time we met, is that the current positions that under the call and part-time employees reflect our current operations. We don't have any lieutenants under the call or part-time members, and it's not consistent with the structure of the department.
Thank you, sir. And my other question is, when I try to line up what kind of raises you're proposing, because the folks that you are proposing would get $25 and $27 an hour. If this didn't pass, either because this board doesn't approve it or town meeting doesn't approve it, where would those folks be?
Well, the numbers
On the existing schedule, what would they continue to be compensated at?
I'm looking at the current rates.
Because your job description, in line with what you said, revising this to match current ops, we don't like, it's not like you're taking the existing schedule and just asking for a salary increase. We've got no
Correct.
positions. So just trying to understand what happens to those folks if this doesn't pass. Where would they get the $25 an hour and $27 an hour? Paramedics with advanced EMT and firefighter paramedic. Where would they be compensated?
They would be compensated at the advanced EMT or firefighter level. Currently, there's nothing that's identified for call members at paramedic level now. I think that was an oversight from years ago, so that's a new rate. And as I mentioned before, this lines up really with similar to the compensation of a full-time member that starts off new. So unfortunately, if we didn't approve those numbers, they would not get compensated for the actual work they do, and they would be getting compensated at the lower levels.
So 18, 16, 20, 21.
Oh, you mean if you didn't approve any of these grades?
No,
or just those last two?
I want to know what we would pay paramedics or firefighter is the last two on your proposed. Paramedic or firefighter with advanced EMT and firefighter 1-2 paramedic. You've proposed to pay them 25 and 27.
Then they would only get $23 an hour.
23. So we're talking about a grand total of $2 or $4 difference.
Correct.
Okay. And that brings me to my last point. And I know this is not the chief's point. He comes at it from a little different perspective, but I come at it as the chair of personnel who reviews all these kind of, this is the SAP salary increase history from FY01 to FY21. This is again a Brian Valentine document. I didn't put it in the packet. It's been in the packet many, many times when we were discussing the annual adjustment. I was trying to look at it from a little different perspective, and that was what did we do with the wage tables, the schedules over time. And I want to thank Vanessa and Brian who struggled at trying to come up with a number so I could look at what turned out to be not apples and apples, apples and oranges. Because the question was, Schedule D has not been increased. The wages in Schedule D have not increased since this table was put into the SAP in 2004, correct? Is that correct? That's my threshold. Okay, Brian's shaking his head. So what I was trying to see is during that time period, what did we do with Schedule A and Schedule C? And Vanessa tried valiantly to kind of give me that comparison, but the classification system has changed a couple of times and it's really apples and oranges. So we abandoned that attempt, and I thank Brian and Vanessa for making it. So what I'm left with is how did we increase actual salaries for Schedules A over time while we weren't doing anything with Schedule D? And I added up all the increases from July 1st, 2004, which would be FY5. There was only 1 year we didn't get an increase. And if these folks who are in fire department positions under Schedule D had been in Schedule A, they would have, and this, does this apply also, Brian, your table to Schedule C, or is this just, it's the SAP increase history. Do you know if it's a schedule? This is for Schedules A and C, right? Okay. They saw a salary increase over 18 years of plus 51.85%, so close to 52%. just to put the chief's request in perspective, that paramedics make $2 or $4 more an hour. If they had been in schedules A and C, they would have seen a significant increase in the wages over time. Maybe that's relevant to someone. Maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but it was relevant to me. And thanks for that information, Brian and Vanessa. And now I open it up to the board. Questions for the chief, comments?
No, I mean, I'd be in favor of approving it on the basis of what you just described alone. Because I think we want to treat all employees as fairly as we can. And clearly these people have not been. And I certainly would defer to the chief in terms of how the position should be described and structured. So I'd be in favor of revising Schedule D as proposed.
Thank
I
you,
agree
Mr.
with Barry.
And I did, board, I just wanted to let you know, in case you weren't following up on this, I should have mentioned this at the outset. Our threshold questions always are, has the governing board approved this? And do you have funding in your budget? And Chief Achilles got approval for this from the Board of Selectmen, which is the governing board of the fire department. So BOS has approved this. And I think you quantified this, chief, at about $5,000, and it is in your budget. So I just want to let the board know before they vote that threshold had been, and I apologize, I should have told you that at the outset. So, Mr. Nixon, you were opining?
Yes, all I said was I agreed with Barry.
Thanks.
I completely agree with Barry, and Chief, thanks for updating this for us.
You're welcome.
I support it.
All right. Mr. Dietz, anybody else?
I'm good.
Okay. And I want to thank the chief for getting back to us with these job descriptions, which we requested. And I appreciate it very much. And I guess it sounds like the board is ready to vote. Would someone like to make the motion? You want me to make the motion? I'll make the motion. I make the motion that the personnel board recommend to town meeting to delete current Schedule D and insert a new schedule as presented in the packet for March 10th. I don't want to read it all out because it's right there in the packet and it's kind of hard to read a table. So the motion will say to reflect the schedule in the packet at Bates, the packet for March 10th at Bates 26, page
Second.
26. I heard my second. Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. All right, Ms. Jasinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes,
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
Mr. Dietz,
Yes,
and the chair votes in the affirmative.
Thank you for your support, everybody. I appreciate it. And I know that the call members will appreciate it too.
All right, just so you know, this goes to town meeting and you, if they ask me questions I can't answer, I'll turn it over to you and you'll be there.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief, for trying to keep us safe during these perilous times. Much appreciated.
You bet.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. Okay, one note on page 27. This is Schedule F. We previously approved a new Schedule F that was recommended and approved by the Recreation Commission. After our last meeting, I realized the hourly rates for the seasonal personnel in the new schedule was the existing Schedule C, not the new Schedule C. So Schedule F incorporates the Schedule C salaries. So I contacted Recreation Commission and I was told by their board last night, they voted to approve. They want the new proposed Schedule C salaries. So if Schedule C goes up at town meeting, they want their salaries to go up. So that was just a housekeeping matter. The new table is now in there and you don't need to do anything about that. All right, did I catch everything? Did anybody see anything in the SAP that we did not approve? Want to go back through? I know Mr. Dietz wants to go back through it one more time just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So with the board's
I want to
indulgence,
go months back.
what?
You want to go months back.
All right, I think we've caught it all.
Next.
Vanessa, do you have anything in your notes that I may have missed?
Just one quick follow-up question at the very end. Schedule H, longevity. We're striking at anniversary date. So just logistically speaking, now that we've moved our salary increase dates to July 1st, would that be your anticipation that that longevity would be granted on July 1st of every year for applicable employees?
That is, so we're on Bates 28, Schedule H.
28, very bottom.
We voted to approve striking the words at anniversary date because we're not using that in the SAP. The new date is start date. So no, it would be the anniversary of the employee's start date, which did not change.
Okay, just want to check that. Thanks.
Longevity would follow when they started working. My understanding is that's what makes sense. Is that a problem?
Nope, just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, so as amended, if approved at town meeting, it would say compensated annually on the anniversary of the employee's start date. Make sense? All right. Last thing I have on the SAP is Bates, page 32. This is something that I've done the last couple years that seems to make sense. Chair makes a motion. Chair moves that the board authorize her to make grammatical and ministerial changes and to take any other act in furtherance of preparing the personnel bylaw, aka salary administration plan, for the town meeting warrant, provided the chair does not make, actually that should say will not make, provided the chair will not make substantive changes to the text of the document which have not been approved by a majority of the members of the board. Comments, questions? Do we have a second on the chair's motion?
Second.
All right. Ms. Jazinski,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
Mr. Dietz.
I vote in the affirmative.
I'm sorry, Jay?
he's a yes.
Yeah.
Votes in the affirmative.
Thank you. And the chair approves. Thank you, everybody.
Trying
All
to shake
right.
things up.
Right.
Are you shaking things up, Jay?
Actually, I don't know why I'm thanking all of you for that vote. You should be thanking me. All right. And finally, we are on 5B and C, and those are related. We have 3 job descriptions pending review. Only one of them was in the packet. Mr. Purple told me he is ready to proceed to request approval of a job description for a shared administrative assistant. And then in late breaking news, he also had some questions that he wanted to discuss with the board about the effective changes to the assistant town administrator and executive assistant position. So I put these on as 2 separate items just because I was updating, and that's why I revised the agenda. But this is all related to the Board of Selectmen's reorganization. So, Mr. Purple, I'll give you the floor. So it's your request, however you want to present it to the board. I'll just note we've got job descriptions in the packet at page 33 and 34 is a draft administrative assistant job description. And at Bates 35, we have the existing admin assistant position. And I'll turn it over to you folks. What do you need from us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will say it was a loaded question when you asked me, if this is, is this something you're looking for us to approve, or do you want our input? And I'm like, well, I'd like your approval, and I've gotten a lot of input on this particular position. Let's start with the administrative assistant position first, please. So this position, I think, has been a long time under discussion. The person who was filling the administrative assistant position in the Selectman's office and has since retired opened up the opportunity for us to take a look at this position again, what it's doing, how it's doing, and what else it might become. At the same time, Mr. Ballantyne and the Treasurer's office has really had a need for some additional staff. I know that probably about a decade ago, Brian lost hours, in his office. And I'm not going to go back that far, but I will say that over the last several years, there has been a need for additional hours in that office. Payroll and benefits are now a bigger beast than they used to be. The assistant treasurer's position is picking up more of the weight in the office because payroll and benefits has become almost specialized, and the ability to share the load of the office is become difficult with just the assistant treasurer trying to shoulder most of it. So we have structured the administrative assistant position in the selectman's office basically to accommodate the selectman's office, as well as to accommodate the needs of the treasurer collector. This was brought before the Board of Selectmen. The board did not the board agreed with the approach. The board did not take a formal vote because, and Ms. Hale can correct me, but I believe that the board felt it was within my administrative purview and it's not something they needed to vote on. If it works, then great. If it doesn't, it's up to me to fix it. So I carry the blessing and the burden of making this change. The position is also going to provide some administrative, limited administrative support, but more handling payroll and payables and some other duties for conservation as well. But the focus is really Selectman's office and Treasurer Collector's office. This is, again, something that's going to remain a fluid position. I think people have expectations that we're going to discover efficiencies where we can maybe spread the position to do more. I'd like to see it provide the service that we're anticipating first. I don't want to take too big of a bite before we do that. So this is, I know that Mr. Dietz volunteered, to try and help with the job description. So he had narrowed it down and tried to distill it down into just the essentials and got rid of a lot of the wordiness. And then there was input from several members of the board, Mr. Ballantyne and Ms. Hale. And sorry, Jay, some of the wordiness came back, but not to the extent it was. So it's in better shape. At this point, I've transferred an employee up from the zoning department who was covering in the selectman's office at roughly 19 hours. I do want to get this position hired as soon as we can, because we do need the help, especially Brian is, this is our busy season anyway with budget, town meeting and everything, but Brian, adding in taxes and everything on top of that and commitments and excise and everything else. It's getting, very busy, and I do want to make sure that we can provide that help as quickly as we can. So I'm seeking for the for Personnel Board to approve the job description as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. I just have a question. Refer to the assistant treasurer, and we currently have that position at grade 4. Assistant treasurer collector. Who is that?
That's David Beery.
David is the assistant treasurer.
Yes.
And then I have a job description in the book. It doesn't have a date on it. It's part of the job descriptions that Vanessa pulled together for us. Administrative secretary, parens, payroll benefits, and parens, business administrator 1. So I don't see, the business administrator 1 is in the SAP. So that would be Kristen's position?
Yes.
Okay. But it's not specified as payroll. There's a job description that says payroll, but in the SAP, it's just business administrator. All right. So, but we'll talk about that another time. So, all right. Comments and questions for Mr. Purple on the administrative assistant job description?
I have one question.
Yes,
On the previous administrative assistant, Mark, under preferred experience, we had grant administration. That is no longer in this job description. Is that because it's not included anymore? Or is that just a missed?
No,
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I want to be looking at what you're talking about. We're on Bates, page 35, which is the
Bates,
administrative
page
assistant current description.
33, Bates, page 34,
Mhm.
preferred experience. And the
Oh.
previous one, in the previous copy of this, we had under preferred experience, we had listed grant administration. So I'm just asking if that was just a missed item, or because Mark's taken it out of this job description, or if do we needed to add it back in if it was missed.
So when you
Just
say
check.
previous, you don't mean the existing job description for admin assistant. You mean a previous draft of what he's
Yes.
proposing. He
Right,
took-
the draft we received previously.
That was my confusion.
Yeah.
I didn't put the previous drafts in because usually when someone comes to me and says, this is our draft, that's what I look at. Perfectly fine. I just didn't understand what you were looking at. Thank you, Dorian. Sorry.
We had like a meeting ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I understand the question Mr. Jasinski is asking. So I think I would refer back to my earlier comment about not trying to take too big of a bite with the position. You know, the one thing I want to make sure I don't do is, and there were comments, I think, from the Board of Selectmen about, well, can this position do this? Can this position do this? Can this position be the Swiss Army knife of all these things we want to do and combine this into one position? I want to make sure that I don't put in too much while we're trying to stretch the position so that nobody gets what they've been anticipating to get out of the position. You know, as I told the board, I fully anticipate this is going to be, the job description for this position is kind of going to be a living document. And it's something that I don't think is going to be something that you approve, we walk away from. And if we have to hire it again in 5 or 7 years, we'll take a look at it. I fully expect that the position is going to be something we're going to be coming back and making adjustments to as we move forward. I know advisory has asked the question, you know, it's 34 hours. What would you do with another 6 hours? What if you made it 40? And I really can't answer that question yet until I get somebody into the position for 34 hours and figure out what are the true needs of the treasurer's office. What are the true needs, you know, in selectmen? How much are we actually giving to conservation? Are there other things we can do that we should be doing? Can it be done in this position? So I think that's kind of an open-ended question. Grants is something we can continue to look at. I think the fact that the state set up a one-stop grant portal is making it less of a necessity right now, because the state is going to help to, you basically tell the state, here's what we want to do. And the state comes back and says, okay, these are the places that you will go to apply for grants to get it done, type of thing. So they're giving you the pathways. And I think that if we added grants in the position, that's what I would look for from that position is go find what's available. And, you know, and then, you know, we'll assign people to execute. And so I think that the state setting up that one-stop program didn't make it as much of a necessity right now, not to say that it couldn't end up there at some point.
It was the only thing that wasn't on the old one. There was a bunch of new stuff added. So that was, and to me, that was pretty important. So I just wanted to double check.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
I had a question and then I'll go to Barry. I believe in our previous discussion, we were told this position would also provide floating support to some boards and other departments. And I don't see that here. Is that out as well? I believe EDC, IT, maybe conservation. were mentioned.
Conservation too.
Yeah,
And that has been deleted from the,
I think for specifics, Madam Chair, the third bullet under job responsibilities, complete follow-up assignments resulting from selectmen and other committee meetings. I think we've left that fairly broad. You know, I mean, you know, there's an unwritten rule in every job description. You know, you're responsible to do all of these things and anything else is assigned. So again, if it becomes a one-off, if it becomes a once every so often type of thing, I'm not sure that meets the litmus test of putting it in a job description, but if it becomes routine and standard and expected, then I think it is something that needs to be listed in there.
so thank you, Mark. Thanks for that. Just trying to understand so Mark had asked me a question, I think it pertained to the executive assistant to the Board of Selectmen, not with respect to admin assistant. At one point, if you're changing the, because usually we look at job descriptions, either because someone files, they updated it. No, typically in my experience on the board, we are looking at changed job descriptions when someone wants to reclassify the position and says, oh, there are new duties here. This person is working harder and longer and more responsibility, and we want to give them an upgrade. And then we have to analyze whether or not the changes. So I just want to make sure we're looking at this the right way. And the question becomes, in this case, is a little different. We have a brand new position that we haven't seen before, which is a shared admin assistant. And what does that mean for the BOS? Do they need to add a position to the SAP? Do we let this slide in under? We can't have two job descriptions for admin assistant. They're either we have, in my opinion, we have a generic description now. Either Mr. Purple is creating a new job, or this new admin assistant position has to in some way apply to all the jobs. Or maybe he has one of the approaches that I think Mr. Dietz had recommended some time ago, keep the job description generic for a position. And then if there are specific department or board requirements, you can have an addendum that you use internally for interviewing, for performance evaluations for your department. But it isn't part of the job description for everybody. But this is a little bit different what Mr. Purple has given us. It's a more specific job description that does not apply to all admins. I don't think you're purporting to make this the new job description for all admins. Like the one that we have from May 11th, 2016 would still be good for some people, but Mr. Purple's would be for him and Brian. I'm a little confused. And I'm not, my intention is not to hold up what you want to do with your department, but just to understand, because this board has to take the big view. What are we doing? Are we approving a second job description for admin specific to you? Does that require regrading analysis? Does that require a new position? Would you be comfortable going back and revising the general admin assistant position and then just doing an addendum for you and Mr. Purple, kind of what Mr. Dietz had described? But Mr. Dietz has come up with something different, so I don't know if he's not using the addendum idea anymore. I'm just a little confused as a process matter where we are, and it's kind of my job to give form to that.
So you may think this is a slippery slope, Madam Chair, but if you went back and kept the administrative assistant 2 position that you just agreed to delete in the SAP, that might be a quick and easy solution, although you may not agree it's the right solution.
We don't have a job description for admin assistant 2. And the reason we deleted it is because Vanessa told me it's not held by anyone. There's no job description for it. And it was in the same grade as admin 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not opposed to having admin 1 and 2, but we would have to change admin plain to admin 1. And
Right.
Someone would need to give me a job description for 2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a job description. So we deleted it because I was told it was redundant because we don't use it. So
No, I agree. I would use that as a vehicle, that this would be an admin assistant 2 position, simply to move this forward. However, as I just said, I'm not sure that you or the board as a whole would agree that that's the right vehicle to move it forward.
I don't understand how we ended up with admin and admin 2 in the same grade on the SAP.
And
I
I
haven't
don't
done a
either.
legislative history on that. And I don't have a job description for admin 2. So I can't tell you how that's different. How's that different? Since I was on the board, we had a principal department assistant in 2017, and we got rid of that in favor of business administrator. So
I will I'll ask the question, and I'm not sure whether I'm asking it of the board or probably Ms. Hale. How is the job description handled with regard to the shared position between assessors and Board of Health, which is an admin position?
great question.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at the language.
And I'm sorry if the answer is not readily available.
Yeah. We have to go back and check on that because that's the only other share position that we have that is between two departments with Mrs. Speary.
Don't get, again, sometimes I just sound like I feel like I sound like I'm being obstructionist. I'm not. This is the year of the policy. I want to try to clarify before I leave town
Right.
or win the lottery. Oh, you can't say that with a volunteer position. I'm not getting paid. Well, if I win the lottery and I leave town, I would really like to put some of this in writing for my successor to understand how our board handled this. And right now I don't have a clear path. We operationally, everything you're doing is great. You want to make your department more efficient. I'm sure your managers, the Board of Selectmen, applaud what you're doing. And we don't want to stand in your way. And shared positions may be key for everybody. But at the same time, we have a classification system that was set up by a consultant. And I went back to look at the notes from 2017. I didn't put the minutes in the packet. We were told to streamline and have less positions because if we proliferate positions, you get into a liability situation if you're paying different people different amounts to do basically the same job. So the HR consultant had cautioned us, more generic positions, pay people the same, don't proliferate your positions because that's just, and again, I'm not suggesting we're not paying equal pay for equal work. There's the possibility, she talked about the liability and the possibility that when you proliferate job positions, that's when you get in a position where you don't know if you're paying equal pay for equal work. So my question is, are we going to have more than one admin assistant position? Are we going to specialize this? I think this board just has to look at what's in front of it and have a discussion and decide. And that's why I put it on the agenda as a discussion of what is the effect of all these new job descriptions. Are we creating a new position? Yes, Vanessa.
Would the board be comfortable with using the template that Mark has drafted here, even though in that case it is more specific, to update the existing administrative assistant description? Because that one is quite old. So I'm wondering if this is a chance to bring that one sort of up to par and then look at using an addendum perhaps for the language that Mark has, the town administrator rather, has added that is really specific to his department and the treasurer's department.
I guess my question would be, thank you for that comment. Are we so increasing the requirements for the admin assistant to make it something that Brian can use and Mark can use? Are we so changing the duties that it's no longer applicable to existing admin assistants? Is there something in the BOS or the treasurer's requirements that causes this to be a substantially different position? And I don't know the answer to that question. And there may be something specific to what Brian or Mark wants this position to do that we would need to do a grading analysis and see if they're properly an admin assistant. I don't know. When you guys looked at the existing administrative assistant position, did you see anything that you were substantially increasing from the existing one? Or do you think, to Vanessa's question, that you could relate it back?
I think the work experience and education are very similar. So it's not like we added a 4-year college degree or anything like that. They look to me to be very similar.
I think the one question is going to be if in fact you do a generic, and I don't disagree with doing a generic administrative assistant a job description, and then as suggested by Ms. Hale, you do an addendum based on what the particulars of that position is, if it's shared, if it's not. But those addendums may give you pause to change the grade or to do a JAQ to determine if it's in the right place given. So like I said, so the position itself, maybe the position itself is a 3, but the addendum is going to, potentially drive, drive a change that would make it more than a 3. I'm not trying to convolute this any further, but
I understand exactly what you're saying. Whether it's in the addenda or in the body of the job description, I guess I don't see addenda as adding significant additional experience. I would give the example of somewhere in the admin assistant position, since it's a municipal position here, page 35, the existing job description, basic knowledge. Duties require knowledge of mass general laws, related municipal policies, bylaws, and codes. Okay. If
There
the
is
Board of
one-
Health is hiring an admin assistant, the addendum could say, duties require knowledge specifically of mass general laws relating to boards of health. To my mind, you've just specified which laws, because nobody has knowledge of all mass general laws, except maybe Barry.
I decline to accept that, but thank you.
It's pretty broad in the current. So, yes, Vanessa.
There is one area that I think we have enhanced in the proposed new job description, which is much more knowledge and comprehension of technology, financial software, online meeting platforms. So that is, I think, the biggest distinction.
So let me ask you a question. We did a survey in the period 2017 to 2019 with a consultant who upgraded all the job descriptions for all the part-time positions, which included admin assistant. That was 2018, okay? Because we have to remember we have part-time as well as full-time admin assistants. I'm assuming most of our admins, are they part-time?
It's about half and half.
Okay, so let's remember the part-times. Abigail Adams said, remember the ladies. I'm remembering the part-times. So thinking back to that administrative assistant part-time job description and the current one we have in front of us, because we don't have the part-time administrative assistant job description. We probably should. Do you think that the changes that you have in this one, the upgrade on technology, is something that should be made in all of them? Is it now time to visit that?
I do, but only because now we're, hopefully at the end of the pandemic or near to it. The online meeting platform and just a higher use of scanning and other software applications are something everyone has had to come up to speed with during COVID. So that's what led to enhancing that language a little bit.
Okay. Do you agree that we should be, and maybe this question for another day, should we be looking at the part-time admin position too? Is it the same thing, or is that apples and oranges? Did you look at the part-time admin? I know this is a full-time position proposing.
It's not exactly apples and oranges. I think, with the extra 20 hours, you're just called on to do more things that you wouldn't have time for in 19 and a half hours. So I think they're fairly similar, but maybe a little bit more in technology at a full-time position.
Well, we'll save that for our equal pay for equal work, part-time,
Right.
full-time. Maybe that's in 2022. So anyway, I didn't mean to complicate the issue. So just looking at the existing job description for admin assistant, if you think this is due for a technology upgrade, that's certainly something I would support. Anybody else on the board have comments or suggestions for a path forward?
Can we take the administrative assistant area and then break it down into underneath that list, BOS/treasurer, there's one there, and list the different departments. So if the job description varies a little bit, they're in the same grade, but if the job description varies ever so slightly, we'll have what that is and it's listed in the SAP. That way they're still listed under administrative assistant, but we're just categorizing where they all are, which departments they're in. So under this one, administrative assistants, grade 3, the first one would be BOS/treasurer. And then we have that job description. So then
But
where
sort
are
of
the other?
merging the two together, you mean?
Yeah, so you're just listing where these administrative assistants are instead of recreating the wheel and making other different positions. You're listing where they are, and then we would have different addendums for those different roles. If there's something different in the job description, they would be all in that same category and they would all be together there. So we would have one main category, and then you could go through and flip through based on which departments have these. I don't know if that makes it more complicated, but to me, that's pretty easy. Okay, administrative assistant. Okay, what does the BOS treasurer person do? What does this department do? You know, DPW, whatever, wherever we have them. That might make it more complicated. I don't know. I think you can't, you're not going to fit one job description into a different department that's going to have different needs. You're not going to do that. So, just a
No,
suggestion.
I think you could take well, and I'm saying easily, Vanessa can correct me, but I really think that you can, you know, the skeleton of, if you take out the things that are specific to the selectman's office and the treasurer's office, I think that you still have a fairly robust job description left, and then we could create an addendum for it. And Vanessa shook her head, so I'm gonna say she subscribes to that's probably the easiest
Yeah.
path forward. To get where I think you want to be, because obviously we haven't updated the administrative assistant job description in quite a while. So I think there are some things that we would do to it to update it, and then we can simply add on an addendum specific to the position that we're discussing.
But you can also have an addendum for each department that has an admin assistant.
Oh, I agreed.
And so if it's all listed under that, so like we have a binder where it has all the job descriptions. So under administrative assistant, you'd have different categories, different departments, and here's what their job description is. So but it's still under that category. They're all grade 3 unless
Right.
we change that, but I don't think we need to do that. But in order to document the changes and the needs in each different department, I think that's the easiest way to handle it. Just a suggestion, so.
One of the questions I have is your new job description would have high school, 5 years work experience, and or 1 to 2 years of a college. And or troubles me in the sense that currently we do not require any college for an admin assistant. What does and or 1 to 2 years of college mean to you?
Means they either have it or they don't.
I don't understand. Does that mean you're going to interview people who just have a high school diploma? Does that mean you're favoring people who have college? That is not in the current admin assistant.
I would think, can you read it one more time?
And I'm on Bates 33, the draft administrative assistant for the proposed new position. High school and 5 years work experience
Yep.
and/or 1 to 2 years of college.
So basically what that means is either they have 5 years of work experience and a high school degree, or 1 or 2 years of experience with a college degree.
That's how I read that too.
That's in the existing as well.
Wait a minute. Jay, repeat that. High school plus
They have
5
either-
years
They
or
have
high school and
Well-
2 years of college, but no work experience.
they have either 5 years in a high school degree or 2 years in a college degree of experience. Either one is fine.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting that from high school and 5 years of work experience.
Yep, stop. So high school and 5 years of work experience, or 1 or 2 years in college.
Yeah, but that's not what it says, though.
That says of college. It shouldn't say of college.
In college.
It should
At
say, it
college.
should say 5, I mean, you can easily reword that to say high school and 5 years of work experience, or 2+ years and a bachelor's degree.
With no work experience. If they have
That is
What
work
are-
experience. 5 years of work experience and a high school degree, or 2 years of work experience and a college degree.
okay,
No,
It's not what it says. I'm not.
Not
clear.
I think
What
that's what the intent is.
Okay, it's not clear to me.
Okay.
Thank you for that, but I would need that language clear. And what I'm trying to get at is, we don't currently say a word about college on an admin assistant job description, and I don't know that it's up to Mr. Purple.
Fair.
That's what he's looking for. But if
So if you don't need it, just write 5+ years work experience and then just leave it at that. Don't
Wait a
put
minute,
anything
Jay.
else.
the job description is what Mr. Purple, and by extension, Ms. Hale and the Board of Selectmen are looking for, they're entitled to look for whatever they want and include whatever they want. My concern is if we're trending toward putting this together and trying to just change the existing one doesn't say anything about college. And I really would like not to say college if we're hiring an admin assistant.
Why?
Why do you need an admin assistant with college experience?
I think what this is saying is
Job.
they're either going to have high school degree and then they need 5 years of work experience if they don't have the college degree, or they have 2 years of work experience with the degree.
Okay, neither one of our current job descriptions says that. That's all I'm saying.
Question.
Yes.
College is mentioned in the original job description. It just looks to be in the wrong place. It's not natural. It's under basic knowledge.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, so this needs to be revised. I see. So we're on page 35. Thank you, Vanessa, for basic knowledge. Must be a graduate of high school, have 5 years work experience, and or 1 to 2 years of college. So there you've said you have to have a high school diploma, 5 years work experience, and if you don't have 5 years work experience, 1 to 2 years of college. I see. They are the same, but they're confusing to me.
Well, the
It's
way
in
that reads is
your
you don't-
place.
the way that reads is you don't need any work experience. You just have to go to college for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah,
That's
and that
what
was
it's-
imported to the existing one, to the new proposed one.
well, in addition, it also doesn't specify what that 1 to 2 years was. Was it 1 to 2 years at a junior college? Is it a regular
Yeah.
college? Is it, what were they studying? Were they just playing ball someplace? It's very, very irrelevant, I feel.
Right. Vanessa, do you need actual work experience or do you care if they have 0 work experience?
I think we would have a strong preference for work experience versus
what?
someone who's coming, but even someone right out of high school. Most kids coming right out of high school have had a job by that point.
So then why don't you just get rid of the high school wording, get rid of the college wording, and just write 2+ years of experience? Those will be my parting words as I have about 90 seconds left.
I think you're gonna want some kind of education being shown and required. Otherwise,
Brian, I hate to interrupt, just Jay, I will be in contact with you when we have to schedule another meeting, and it may be in short order. I won't hold you up. I know you have to depart, and we do not have the date yet. So I will prevail upon you when we know that. So expect an email from me when I get an email from Mark for approval.
Sounds good.
All right. Jay, thank you so much.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So one thing occurs to me, if we're just revising the administrative assistant for Brian and Mark, then it's whatever the needs of their department is. They decide college, no college. But if we're purporting to revise and make a more generic that'll apply to everyone, we should talk to the departments that have admin's assistants and ask them what they need. I would pull upon that wisdom. Okay. And what usually happens is someone comes to us with an enhanced job description because I said earlier, they want to regrade the position and they make it what they want it to be. And then we run it through the scoring tool. So maybe that's what we should be doing with this one. Call it administrative assistant, shared treasurer, BOS. Have Vanessa, Mark, and Brian make it whatever they want it to be. And then we'll score it and we'll tell you if it ends up in the same place and you just leave what you have alone. Or you can go ahead and try to make it more generic, But in that case, I would like to hear from other departments, what do they need their admin to be? I don't want to add a college requirement if that's at odds with everybody else. Seems to me you have two paths you could take. Your specialized job description, that is what your departments need, or trying to wrap this in. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp and I could go either way. I would prefer to see more generic job descriptions. I think with administrative assistants, they're always going to do, no two administrative assistants in different departments are going to be doing the same job. Just the tasks are going to be different. And I would love to see a generic job description that in general terms describes what they do, and not have a job description for BOS and treasurer and a job description for, this share. It just, we're going to end up, as you talked about before, with the proliferation of job descriptions that we were trying to avoid. So my strong preference would be to move in that direction. I'm not sure I understand why we need a job description that's so specific to this particular job. And maybe I can be convinced, but I would just go in the direction of a more generic administrative assistant position that would be broad enough to cover what you want to do here.
I think Barry's on the right track. I think that it's up to the department head to decide what the individual's responsibilities would be. And I think that it's easy to say that they'll follow the direction that's given to them in terms of those responsibilities by the department head, or something to that extent.
So am I in essence looking, so instead of asking you to approve a job description for administrative assistant, am I asking you to approve an addendum for a position underneath the existing job description of administrative assistant?
Why do you need the addendum? If the job description for administrative assistant is broad enough, why do you need another document setting out specific tasks that they're going to do?
Because I'd probably get yelled at if I didn't come here first, Barry. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page, and maybe I'm being too cautious, but I just want to make sure that, we're not going to get dragged in after the fact, whether it's this board or some other, entity that isn't going to be happy about things. I'm just trying to, make sure that everybody agrees we're stepping off with the same foot so this all goes smooth. So I appreciate, I'm trying to find a way to move forward. But I appreciate the discussion. I understand the issues that are being raised.
Yeah, and I may be a minority on this. I'm not a fan of addendums for the reason that you articulated earlier, because then you start having different jobs and it should go into the grading of the job. So I just like having general documents that encompass what the person's going to be doing.
Well, when
Again,
you hire someone, you have to give them a job description. You have to show them their job description, what their responsibilities are going to be. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. So if you have someone in the BOS office and the treasurer's office, and you're not specific with them with the job description, we could have a problem down the road. So I disagree. I think a very general one might be fine for the main category, but if you're going to have somebody who does the job in a different department with different responsibilities, you have to spell that out to those people. That you have a legal responsibility to do that. So I disagree with that. I think you have to be very specific.
But again, every job is different. Every administrative assistant has a different job.
I agree.
So you.
I don't know how you can be really general. I understand the general part, Barry, but if you have very specific responsibilities in a department, you have to spell those out in a job description when you hire someone. You can't just willy-nilly say, oh, well, you have to do this and this and this and this, and it's not spelled out for them.
You have a conversation with them about what is entailed in that job, but it's all encompassed within the tasks laid out in the broader job description. We can agree to disagree, it's fine.
Yeah, I think we'll have to disagree on that point. I know what you're saying, but yeah, no, I disagree with that.
I understand what everyone's saying. I introduced the idea of addenda because that was something that Jay had introduced to the board some time ago. It's actually in some old minutes, maybe before some of you were here, and then he has since reintroduced it as a way to have a document to address Dorian's concerns, that when you're interviewing with someone, you know, to say, you need to know Mass General laws, their head will explode. But you could have an addenda that says, you know, chapter 41 pertaining to boards of health or whatever, planning or whatever it is. So, but at the same time, our classification system demands that we pay people in one grade the same amount or else have a regrading analysis. So I'm sorry that Jay had to depart because his input is always helpful. And I'm not sure we're giving Mr. Purple the answer that he needs, the specificity.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Purple.
So, you know, in terms of a potential regrading, I mean, you know, I took a look, at the range for a grade 3. I don't see that this position is going to, that we're going to have trouble hiring into this position based on that range. I think it's an annual of 42 to 58 a year, of $1,000 a year. I don't see that that's going to be an issue for the position. So I'm not sure that I'd advocate for a grading. And as much as he may be sitting in a very minority position, I would be happy to go with Mr. Rubenstein's approach and simply hire under the existing administrative assistant job description. And then obviously in the hiring process, we're going to need to talk about the specifics of the position and how, this is going to work. And the one thing, and I shared this with the selectmen, the difference in having a shared position, which is different than other shared positions we may have, is that the two departments that it's mainly serving are 5 feet apart. So it's not like assessors and Board of Health are in 2 different buildings and separated by 1/8 of a mile. This person can serve both departments, and be in the same place at the same time. So again, just trying to find a way to move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. So I think I would support, if you folks want to go back and just take the existing admin assistant position. We had a comment from Vanessa earlier saying this existing job description could probably do with an update. It's 2016 and it doesn't talk enough about technology. So if you want to update the existing admin assistant position, talk to the departments. I don't know how many departments we have who have admin assistants, because this would then apply to all of them. Or else you can move forward with a separate addendum. I'm not sure we've given you an answer as a board. I'm not sure what we have.
I just want to, like I said before, I just want to make sure. Yeah, I have 2 goals here. The first goal is to allow us to move forward, to get somebody in this position, because, quite frankly, we need the help. And the fact that you've seen Mr. Ballantyne go off camera probably 4 times in this discussion means he's going out to handle things that we don't have people to handle right now. So I'm doing this as much for him, as I am for my own selfish needs. The second goal I'm trying to achieve here is that I'm not stepping on any toes, when we're doing this, and making sure that, we all understand what we're doing. If we want to proceed under the existing administrative assistant, job description, I would be comfortable with that. I think that Ms. Hale, has already acknowledged that, yes, this needs to be tweaked. I don't think, and I'll look at you, Vanessa, is whether the tweaks are significant. I think that, it needs to be updated, but yeah.
It's more about technology, online meeting platforms, getting rid of some really redundant old-fashioned language. I think we could do that pretty quickly.
And Vanessa, if you would address that issue we discussed, basic knowledge and experience, and move the high school, college.
Noted that, yes.
And if you're talking about high school plus 5 years or just 2 years of college, if you want to expand on that, it isn't
Yep.
exactly what I think Mr. Dietz thought it said. So if you want to work with that and come back with something. And I think that, this, so Mr. Purple, was it your intention to talk about assistant town administrator and executive assistant positions today? Or did you, because there was still a question outstanding with those.
I only had one question, Madam Chair, and it was really regard to the executive assistant position to the Board of Selectmen. This is a unicorn position. There is no other executive assistant position in town. And in the job description, there has been a fairly significant increase in the job duties. The most significant being the inclusion of procurement duties and assigning the position as the deputy procurement officer. So I'm the chief procurement officer for the town, but I'm allowed to delegate, and assign procurement duties, to others. Ms. Esposito is obviously handles more of the day-to-day procurement for this office, as well as most other offices that don't have procurement people in them. And so she's kind of the gatekeeper. That's the biggest thing. I think that obviously I would request a JAQ on this. My question for consideration by the board is there's some discussion as to whether the job description, the title of the job should be expanded, to include deputy procurement administrator or official in the title, or simply acknowledging it in the duties and responsibilities in the body. It's fairly prominent the way we're looking at it in the duties and responsibilities. But does the board feel that having it in the title make it, I guess, more applicable or more likely to cause a job, cause a grade change rather than simply, in other words, is that a tipping point for a grade change, in your mind? Does it elevate the likelihood of a grade change having it in the title versus just simply having it in the duties and responsibilities?
I think it makes it more likely. To me, it would make it more likely for a grade change.
So how I look at this, Mark, is whether or not thank you, Dorian. So Mark had posed this question, so that's why I added it to the agenda. Mark had posed the question, we're adding this duties and responsibilities to an existing position. To me, it matters not whether you change the title or not. It's what are you doing with the job? Because if you wanted to be disingenuous, and I'm not suggesting it, you would just skip the job title and say, okay, nothing to look at here, no regrading necessary. I think the title's that's just a pro forma thing. What we're looking at is section 3. No new position shall be established, nor the duties of an existing position so change that a new level of work demand exists. And section 3 is kind of awkward, but I think that's what we're looking at. Are we changing the duties of an existing position? And you've said we are. So personnel board looks at the data and rates it. And to me, section 3 analysis holds whether you actually change the title or not. But if you do change the title, then it has to go in the SAP and then town meeting. So either way, you're talking about a substantial change in the duties. I don't think whether you decide to change the title or not, you are changing the duties of the position, and we should do a scoring analysis. And my understanding is Ms. Esposito, who currently sits in the position of BOS executive assistant, has been doing procurement for some time, right? So this is just acknowledging and updating her job description. So I think in fairness to her, if this is a significant responsibility that she has been shouldering and will continue to shoulder, whether or not you decide to add it to the SAP as a change in title is not really the main issue. The main issue is she entitled to more money and a higher grade for what she's doing?
So I wanted to, yeah, so, and thank you for that. I kind of agree with what you just laid out, Betsy. I think it's more the content than what the headline is, you know, for the job description. I just want to, there's been some conversations as to, you know, is it important? Is it something that needs to be highlighted? But, you know, I agree that it's the task more than simply if it's in the title. Okay, I know,
Let me ask you a question, Mark. If Lori were to win the lottery and not come to work tomorrow and you were hired as POS executive assistant, is it Lori who does the procurement, or would the person that you were hiring into the position, if Lori won the lottery, would you also want that person to continue with that task?
I would want that position to continue to handle the day-to-day. Now, I may end up hiring somebody who doesn't have that, but obviously, as with some things and with this shared position with Brian, some of these things are going to be training, you know, so we'll require somebody, if you don't have that level of certification, that level of experience or training, we're going to provide that for you so that you can continue to do that.
Again, my point, thank you for that. My point is, do you want the position of executive assistant to the BOS, who reports to the BOS, to be able to continue to do procurement? This is not specific to Ms. Esposito.
Yes, it's position, not person. Correct.
Okay. In that case, I think it matters, and again, subject to the board, if the board wants to see the SAP change. I would say in that case where we're not really adding a new position, we're just adding to the responsibilities, we should score it. My question is, even if it doesn't advance it to the next grade, is it a significant enough responsibility that we should be compensating the person for what they're doing? Maybe it turns out, because it's not an extra college degree, it's not 12 years of experience. Maybe when we do the JAQ scoring with the tools we've been given, we find that the grade stays where it is. But if it's a significant change in duties, are you looking at giving additional compensation for it?
So all I will say is one step at a time. But yes, I you know, when I had this quick conversation with Miss Hale at some point along the process, I can't remember when, but you know, as to where the position fell in the scoring as it stands and how close it may be to the break point for the next grade, right? So, you know, something like this could move it into the next grade, or maybe there's too much distance that even if you accommodate these new responsibilities. So if the JAQ does not give it, I guess the, you know, make that financial adjustment that that you've mentioned, Ms. Rosenblum, then I would like to, you know, probably consider door number 2. But I figured let's go the normal route first, see where that takes us, and then we can talk about the other half.
Okay. And thank you. And I know I segued into one position, but I see this BOS reorganization as a big picture. So that's why I felt comfortable. Also, I just wanted to leave the discussion of the administrative assistant because I didn't have an answer for you, and then get on to some more fruitful. So
I wanted to just circle back to the administrative assistant because I'd like to leave here.
Yes,
with,
I would like to do that, but just
the path forward.
Where we're at with the executive assistant position, you will get us a job description when it's available, and then we can do our scoring analysis. So
yes,
we're all in
I will
agreement.
have that to you before the end of the week.
Okay, starts with a job description, and then Vanessa and I can bring Jay in on it, and we can put it through the grading tool. So thanks. So back to admin assistant. The only reason I don't give stronger guidance is because it's not my job to tell the Board of Selectmen how to run their office. Most folks come to us, say what they want to do with their positions, and then I tell them whether there's a role for the personnel board in it. So in this case, if I think where we're at, if you want to go with a generic job description for admin assistant, you can bring it to us. Or if you want to go with something more specific, and then we can JAQ it. I think, you know, there's the Dorian School and the Berry School, but the board has not taken a position on it. We have never set out an edict on what job descriptions have to look like.
If I'm hiring under the existing job description, then I guess I'm really not asking the board to take any action, correct?
No, unless you said, oh, the occasion of hiring a new admin assistant for the BOS has caused us to look at this existing job description. There's a discrepancy, as Vanessa pointed out, between basic knowledge and experience, you kind of repeat. So that should be cleaned up. Right now,
Right.
basic knowledge says must be a graduate of high school. And then under experience, work requires 5 years of experience. So you'd want to clean it up. And I presume you'd want to add a little technology.
Yeah, I think, and I think that, so the way I'm looking at this is that nothing in the discussion today would preclude me from advertising this position to move forward. However, overall, the administrative assistant job description, which affects all administrative assistant positions, does need some fine tuning as assigned by, or noted by Ms. Hale and discussed today by the board. And I think that's something that we would, or by we, I mean Vanessa, would undertake for your consideration.
Yeah, recently, someone on an elected board came to me and said, what do we need to do if we want to hire for a position? I said, you have to determine if the position's already in the SAP. Can you work within the existing job description? If you check both those boxes, unless you want to come to personnel board for some advice on some other aspect, you're free to go.
Well, believe it or not, even though I came with an ask, didn't need an answer, I do appreciate the discussion. And I really think, we've moved this forward. And I think that, between Vanessa and I, we can commit to coming back with a revised administrative assistant job description, which just kind of freshens it up with some of the things that we discussed today.
All right. And thank you, because you've highlighted yet another area in which I think the board needs to publish some guidance in the year of the policy.
I told you offline, Betsy, these things that, these things that don't get touched, that don't affect anything in that. And then, it's kind of like Beetlejuice. You mention it, and all of a sudden we have these instances of it that happen.
Well, they have come up throughout the years. I've been reviewing minutes. It's just that nobody ever wrote it down what they did. So you just go back and review minutes. There were these issues before, and I just think the only record that we have of how to proceed is what's in the minutes, and maybe some policies can come out of that. So,
no, thank you.
All right, that's all I have. If everybody's happy. I was going to ask the board to schedule a meeting for March 31st for any outstanding SAP items, but I don't think that we have any. So, and we've already scheduled a meeting for April 14th. Vanessa, does your Zoom room system require us to schedule a meeting for May now?
Because you don't meet it at night, I think you'll be fine during the day.
All right. Does the board want to schedule a meeting for May while we're together?
Sure.
You want to stick with the second Wednesday of the month? That would be May 12th,
Sounds good.
12
Sure.
noon.
I can't. I guess I can move. I have a hair appointment that day.
Oh, my God.
Can't miss my hair appointment. I'll try to switch that.
It'll probably
Betsy,
just easier for everybody if we stick with, yes, Ms. Hale.
I do have a conflict at 1:30 that day. Would the board be willing to start at 11:30?
Can we just go in the morning and go to 8
Or
o'clock?
a
Let's
different
just
time?
say 11.
Okay, thank you.
11. Not a problem. We seem to be good with 2.5 hours. All right, so we are scheduled for Wednesday, May 12th at 11 a.m. We've previously scheduled a meeting for April 14th, and we are on standby to have a special meeting. And I would say when we get notice from Ms. Hale or Mr. Purple that they need approval for us on IT manager salary, if there's some other item for SAP pending, I won't limit the meeting. We can have a quick meeting where we address a couple of things. All right, anybody else have anything?
Nope, all set.
All right, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Sorry for the lack of clarity in there somewhere, but sometimes knowing you don't have clarity is itself clarifying.
All right, stay
All right.
well,
All
everybody.
right, thank you
Take
all.
care.
We
Thank you.
are adjourned at 2:25.
Woohoo.
Ms.
Thank
Hale,
you.
the gavel is down.
Bye.
All right, if Vanessa, if you